Quilts are an extremely important part of our nation's history. They are a unique way for people to document important events that occur during their lifetime. Some make quilts to honor their friendships, some make quilts in honor of their families, and some make memorial quilts. Whether it be in memory of or in awareness of any event that takes place in one's day, one's life, or one's country, or even one's society, these memorial quilts are a memorable way to memorialize something or someone that is important to you. Throughout this documentary, we will be analyzing 3 different types of memorial quilts: personal memorial quilts, event memorial quilts, and awareness memorial quilts. For each of these different subjects, we will discuss why these are so significant and discuss their impact on our lives. Quilt makers and their communities have used each type of memorial quilt to mark significant experiences that have impacted lives, whether personal moments or worldwide events. In the documentary, we will really dig deep to try to find out why and how a society could be built on memorial quilts.
Quilting has been around for centuries. However, it is at the end of the 18th century, with the birth of the Romantic movement, that people used quilting as a way of mourning. Images of the deceased were now part of the mourning process, and that included images printed on needlework. Nancy Butler was an American quilter in the early to mid-19th century. She is known to have made at least 2 memorial quilts in her lifetime. This particular quilt is entitled Tombstone. It commemorates the death of her granddaughter in 1842, who died of scarlet fever. You can see this in the quilt itself, with the name of her granddaughter and date of death, a quilted tombstone. Along with memorial quilts that memorialize a person or death, there are also those that commemorate joyous events such as births. This quilt is one of my own family celebrating the birth of my sister in 2000. Gifted to my parents shortly after my sister's birth by my great Aunt Elizabeth, it is displayed on the wall of my sister's bedroom to this day. The next one was also quilted by my great Aunt Elizabeth in 1995 to celebrate my birth. It too is displayed on my wall to this day in my bedroom. Another example of ways in which quilts can be used as a means of remembering an event or a person are t-shirt quilts, where t-shirts of a loved one are sewn together. This particular t-shirt quilt was made to celebrate a graduation and given as a gift.
A memorial quilt can also be used to commemorate a significant cultural event. For example, this quilt was made in memorial of the 1995 Srebrenica massacre. Titled the Diaspora Quilt, it carries the names of 25 men and boys who were killed during the genocide of over 8,000 Muslim Bosniaks in July of that year. The event took place in and around the town of Srebrenica during the Bosnian War. This quilt carries significance in 2 respects. First, it serves as an educational tool. After being created in Tuzla, a small town in Bosnia, the Diaspora Quilt has gone on tour in the United States, including being presented to Congress on December 30th of 2004. The quilt helps to inform thousands of people every year of the humanitarian and cultural tragedy that took place in Srebrenica. Secondly, the Diaspora Quilt was created by women who themselves lost relatives at Srebrenica or were displaced by the war. According to the advocacy project for this quilt, which speaks on behalf of the women who commissioned it, quilting allows women to work together to share their experiences, which can be deeply therapeutic. This phenomenon of therapy through quilting is not unique to women who lived through the Srebrenica genocide. Women who grieve or celebrate cultural events throughout the world use quilting as a method to do so. So, it is not surprising that women and men in the United States are also using quilting as a way to memorialize important events in their lifetimes. Perhaps the greatest example of this is the 9/11 Memorial Quilts Project. The project is composed of many different quilts, and the quilt blocks were donated by hundreds of volunteers across the United States. The quilt project is preserved at the 9/11 Memorial Museum, located in New York City. Perhaps the most extravagant quilt in this project is the one seen here. This quilt depicts all 3 of the plane crashes that occurred that day, the impact on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and Flight 93. The quilt is in memoriam of the first responders, which is represented by the fire truck and ambulance which were appliqued onto the quilt. Not only do these images symbolize the spirit of heroism and patriotism that occurred that day, the quilt makers took a step further by naming the specific units that were dispatched to the scene at the World Trade Center. The quilt also memorializes all of the lives lost that day. Thousands of faces were placed on the quilt in loving memory of the victims of the 9/11 attacks. Like the diaspora quilt, the 9/11 Memorial Quilts Project holds a larger significance in the culture in which it exists. For example, this project has gone on tour throughout the United States, making appearances at quilt festivals in Washington, D.C. and Houston, Texas. Moreover, many of us who are old enough will forever remember hearing the news on 9/11 and understand the deep cultural significance of the event. 9/11 shapes our perspectives on countering terrorism and keeping our homeland safe. It is still a large contributor to our relations with Muslims and Islamic countries, and 9/11 is celebrated as a tribute to our nation's first responders. When we are shown the 9/11 memorial quilt, we as Americans can easily understand the deeper context that lies behind it. Understanding other cultures is not as easy of an undertaking. However, quilts are one of the many types of material culture from which we may learn about others. They are created by communities of people who, either purposefully or unintentionally, incorporate their culture into their art. And quilts make for an excellent conversation piece to open up dialogue between individuals and discuss important, diverse cultural issues and events.
As previously mentioned, there are many different types of memorial quilts out there today. One type is an awareness memorial quilt. One of the biggest and most widely known projects is the AIDS Memorial Quilt. When examining the AIDS Memorial Quilts, we travel back 3 decades to San Francisco in the mid to late 1980s. A small group of strangers rallied together to start the project of creating a memorial for people who have died of AIDS. These participants wanted to help people understand the true impact of this horrible disease and to preserve the lives and stories within the quilt, along with educating others about AIDS and HIV awareness and prevention. The quilt was first created in 1985 by Cleve Jones. Jones is an LGBT rights and AIDS awareness activist. He started to plan and organize an annual candlelight march to honor San Francisco Supervisor Harvey Milk and Mayor George Moscone, who were assassinated in 1978. In 1985, when Jones was planning the annual march, he became aware of the fact that over 1,000 people from San Francisco had died of AIDS. After learning of this, Jones asked his fellow marchers to write the names of loved ones who were lost to AIDS on placards. After the march, Jones, along with others, taped these cards on the walls of the San Francisco Federal Building, and the wall of names began to look like a patchwork quilt. Jones became inspired once he saw this. He and his friends made plans to create a larger memorial. About a year later, Jones created the first piece of the AIDS Memorial Quilt. The first panel was in memory of his friend, Marvin Feldman. In June of 1987, Jones teamed up with several people to organize the Names Project Foundation, which is the AIDS Memorial Quilt. The quilt began to gain recognition in big cities that were really affected by AIDS. The workshop in San Francisco began to receive panels from around the country. They began to receive donations of equipment, sewing machines, and the effort of many volunteers. Over the years, the project has grown to an unbelievable extent. Today, there are chapters of the Names Project all over the country, and it has even spread to more independent quilt affiliates around the world. Since its start in 1987, the quilt displays around the world have received over 14 million visitors. This foundation has raised over $3 million for AIDS service organizations. The project is made up of over 48,000 panels, and each panel has been professionally photographed to create visual records that have also been digitized to be more widely available for viewers. Each panel consists of information like letters, photos, and biographies. Part of the goal is to create a legacy for future generations. The only time the quilt has ever been displayed in its entirety was throughout the mid-1980s to the mid-1990s in Washington, D.C. Since there are so many separate panels, the Names Project stages over 1,000 quilt displays every year. These displays can occur in schools, places of worship, galleries, along with community centers and any other place that would like to host. This project allows anyone to make a panel or display a quilt. The size and recognition of this project is so extreme that hopefully one day it can put an end to the sickness that inspired it. The AIDS Memorial Quilt is just one of many projects used to build awareness using quilts. As you can see, memorial quilts are created for a lot of different reasons. They can be made to memorialize a death, to celebrate a birth, to memorialize a nationwide event, or to support awareness in a worldwide epidemic. Whatever the reason may be, we believe these memorial quilts are an important symbol that provides quilt makers, viewers, and users with comfort and tranquility. It is a unique way to remember something or someone, and it has been providing that purpose for many decades. We hope that after watching this documentary, viewers understand the meticulous effort that quilt makers attempt when creating a memorial quilt. We hope that viewers understand what a memorial quilt means to those who make them. And most of all, we hope that viewers have a new understanding in what it means to be a memorial quilt.